While we expected US military action against Iran's nuclear facilities, to see how it unfolded and now deal with the ramifications is quite something. As I said on Thursday, this is an inflection point in history. It's fascinating to see exactly how the US acted, and we need to consider what might happen next, including strategic benefits in the Middle East and therefore benefits for world security. Also, we need to discuss the pathetic approach of the Albanese Labor government, a government either without instincts on foreign policy or without values, or both. Let's start by recapping what the US appears to have done. With 14 massive ordnance penetrators, the 13-ton bombs dropped from 7 state-of-the-art stealth B-2 bombers. They took out 2 of the nuclear facilities. A third was taken out by Tomahawk cruise missiles fired from a nuclear-powered submarine in the Gulf. The US claims the damage is severe and the operation was an outstanding success.
In this satellite image from before the attack, you can see Fordo's security perimeter and 3 tunnel entrances. Compare that to after the strike, these grey areas, presumably dust and debris from the attack zone here. Take a closer look. This was the mountainside before the raid, and here you can see 2 distinct strike zones, each hit with at least 3 bombs. Analysts suggest these details may be ventilation shafts, potential weak points chosen so the bombs carried their explosive payload as deep as possible.
Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
I can only confirm that there are both public and private messages being directly delivered to the Iranians in multiple channels, giving them every opportunity to come to the table. They understand precisely what the American position is, precisely what steps they can take to allow for peace, and we hope they do so.
Yeah, in response so far, Iran has downplayed the damage to its facilities. It's promised revenge, and it's launched yet more missile attacks against Israel.
Rubble-filled streets, scattered shrapnel, and the skeletons of homes. The people of Ramat Aviv woke with a shuddering jolt. Buildings decimated by an Iranian missile.
This is sickening stuff. Israel and now the US have conducted highly targeted attacks on Iran, hitting nuclear facilities and before that missile and air defence facilities and the military and nuclear weapons hierarchy. Israel's attacks have steered clear of civilian areas, even going so far as warning an area of Tehran that it would bomb a missile factory nearby. In response, though, Iran rains missiles down on Israeli urban areas. These indiscriminate attacks on civilian areas have seen a major hospital hit by a massive explosion, and numerous houses and accommodation blocks hit in Haifa and the Tel Aviv area. This is against the rules of war. This is targeting civilians. But where is the condemnation from the activists and the United Nations about war crimes? Where are the protesters and the leftist politicians marching in the streets against Iranian attacks on civilians? They've all been actively pretending over the past 20 months, pretending that Israel targets civilians. And now when it's actually happening to Israelis, the silence is deafening. Why do these activists and extremists not care about Israeli lives? And now the US has issued a terrorism alert, with Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem saying the ongoing conflict brings the possibility of increased threats to the US in the form of possible cyber attacks, acts of violence and anti-Semitic hate crimes. There are reports that the US received warnings from Iran about terror attacks in the US and elsewhere. Think about what this tells us about the Iranian regime. Here is an evil Islamist extremist regime that's funded and organised horrific terrorist atrocities against Israel It's instigated rocket fire against Israel. It's attacked Israel directly. It's repeatedly promised to destroy Israel, and it's threatened the US and other Western nations too. And it's pursued nuclear weapons despite agreeing not to. And now, after instigating war, when its nuclear facilities are bombed, it responds by again firing missiles at Israeli civilians and threatening terrorism. In other words, it's threatening to kill more innocent people. How could anyone anywhere even contemplate backing this dangerous and evil regime? Yet this CNN report suggests there is some support in Tehran.
You will punch the United States and Israel in the mouth, he says. Trump, you are threatening my leader, this woman says. Don't you know my nation believes death is sweeter than honey? What do you have, Israel? He says. You have nothing. You are occupiers, unreligious. You're killing people, killing women. You kill everyone. You're terrorists.
Now, I'd take all this with a grain of salt. Of course, there might be supporters of the regime there in Tehran, but yeah, you didn't see huge crowds there. And if you're in Tehran, there's only one public position to take if you value your life. The way the regime acts like a blanket across free expression in that country has to be seen to be believed. I was there 20 years ago, and the only country I've visited where the repression was more obvious was North Korea. Anyway, incredibly, even here in Australia, in our lucky country, some protesters seem to support the Iranian regime, although seemingly just as another way to demonise Israel and the US.
Protests in Sydney and Melbourne attracted voices condemning the strikes.
It has to stop. I don't think the Iranians have ever provoked anything to be subjected to this sort of violence.
Well, that's a surprising take, especially when many members of the Iranian community in Australia have come here fleeing the theocratic regime of the Ayatollah. And sure enough, there are signs calling for regime change in Iran and others giving voice to that sentiment.
But a smaller group supported the US action.
They are using our Iranian civilian people as a shield to protect that damn Ayatollah.
Yeah, a smaller group, said the reporter, smaller than the anti-Israeli pro-Palestinian protests, sure, but probably much more representative of the Iranian diaspora. Regime change is not officially an aim of the Israeli or American military action against Iran, but both countries have long said they'd welcome it. And the US president fueled speculation with a social media post. He says it's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? He adds MIGA, make Iran great again, to that post. The US political debate is as polarised as ever, with the hard left wildly against Trump's action and mouthing sentiments that could only please the Ayatollah as he hides out in Iran.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who posted this in part, quote, President Trump misled the country about his intentions, failed to seek congressional authorization for the use of military force, and risk American entanglement in a potentially disastrous war in the Middle East.
But it is so grossly unconstitutional. All of you know that the only entity that can take this country to war is the U.S. Congress. The president does not have the right.
Meanwhile, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is calling for Trump's impeachment, saying this, quote, he has impulsively risked launching a war that may ensue for generations. It is absolutely and clearly grounds for impeachment.
Well, he does have the right and the power to take military action like this, and he only needs to go back to Congress after a certain amount of time, and if it becomes a war, a declaration of war. And on the right of politics, there are, of course, plenty of conservative isolationists who worry that America's risking being caught up in another foreign conflict. But people need to take a reality check here. They need to understand what's at stake and understand some history as well, and realise that America had to do this. Now, Trump deserves credit, of course, but it's unlikely that any American president would have done any different. A succession of presidents, Republican and Democrat, have opposed Iran getting nuclear weapons. Iran has been a malevolent force since the Islamic Revolution in the late 1970s. And apart from the disgusting American embassy hostage saga, Iran and its proxies like Hezbollah and other actors in Lebanon and Syria, and even in South America, have conducted deadly terrorist attacks targeting Israelis and Americans in particular, but plenty of others too. The idea this terrorist nation could wield nuclear weapons would be an unthinkable outcome for Israel and for the US and for the world. In fact, it's almost as unthinkable as allowing Soviet nuclear missiles to be based in Cuba at the height of the Cold War back in the 1960s, when President John F. Kennedy drew a line in the sand.
The 1930s taught us a clear lesson. Aggressive conduct, if allowed to go unchecked and unchallenged, ultimately leads to war. This nation is opposed to war. We are also true to our word. Our unswerving objective, therefore, must be to prevent the use of these missiles against this or any other country, and to secure their withdrawal or elimination from the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah, Kennedy's strength held sway there during the Cuban Missile Crisis. But just think about that. Think about what he said. Think about the threat of Iran, what it's already done and what it could do with nuclear weapons. And all that Trump haters need to do is ask, what would JFK have done? I think it's obvious. Even the Democratic hero JFK would have taken this action. The world is all the better for this having happened, although we do have to brace ourselves for the Iranian response, of course. If it comes, no doubt there'll be a heavy secondary action from the US. Having come this far, neither Israel, America or the free world can afford to accept anything but surrender from Iran, surrendering its nuclear weapons program and its sponsorship of global terrorism. If that happens, the entire dynamic of the Middle East will change. All of the Sunni Arab world will be relieved, and the Shia crescent of Lebanon, Syria and Iraq might have a chance for consolidation and peace. Much can go wrong. We have to watch this carefully. But there is an historic opportunity for progress here if the most insidious influence in the Middle East is put back in its box.